Welcome back. I hope you're all suitably refreshed. We are now entering the stage with some of the individuals that this conference rightly prides itself on, the FiReStarters, companies that may one day not only promise to change the world, but also promise to make it better, or at least have that clear ambition. Now, I don't want to say directly now too much about the companies themselves, because I'd rather have the delegates themselves make those introductions. I'd like to begin first with Heidi Lubin. Sorry, there you are, Heidi, CEO of HEVT. Please tell us what your company does and your mission.
Sure. So we're focused on energy efficiency and the availability of power with a nexus around electric motor technologies. So our electric motors drive up to 60% of the initial costs out of the electric motors, up to 3 times more efficiency without using rare earth metals. I think one of the things that's particularly interesting to us right now is we actually had the great privilege last night to spend some time with Michael Pfeffer and Larry Smar and my colleague Heather Richmond, who's also here. And we were talking about the installed base of motors and electric infrastructure in this country. And Larry reminded me that the American Society of Civil Engineers has been rating our energy infrastructure. So in 2012, I think we got a D-. Larry, I looked this morning, and we've improved to a D+. Go team! But we've got a long way to go, and we think that our technology, and we can get into it a little bit further, has a huge potential to arguably abate carbon quicker than almost anything else. And in the wake of a couple weeks when we've seen carbon hit 400 parts per million for the first time ever, which is a very frightening statistic. The fact that we can address about 73% of the installed base of electric motors, which is an annual electricity spend of $565 billion a year. Sorry, 73% of that is actually $410 billion. And more than, I think, 7,000 some odd megatons of carbon annually. We can actually, the International Energy Agency estimates that we can essentially flatten the demand curve for electricity between now and 2030. And that's when we get into the availability side of what we're thinking about, because as we look to energy poverty issues and trying to create essentially room to bring more of the human population up the development scale, I think it's critical that we also use our resources wisely. And with the installed base of electric motors right now, they're only about 25 to 40% efficient, many of them. So we're not using our resources wisely right now.
Heidi, thank you very much. I think the theme, which will be emerging from many of the people on this stage, is going to be about climate change and that control of energy, energy dispersal, how energy is collected and how energy is stored. And I know somebody who has a lot to say about this is Stefano Poli of Electro Power Systems. Explain briefly what Electro Power Systems does, Stefano, and how, indeed, particularly with developing economies, it's helping to change things.
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning for everybody. We are essentially designing and producing and selling a fuel cell system, but a quite innovative concept of fuel system that is a self-rechargeable system. And in particular, based on what you ask in terms of developing countries, we're trying to address, let me say, or to contribute, let me say, to rural electrification, let me say, in many developing countries in Asia now. And of course, we're looking for Africa as a next frontier. Essentially, our system is allowing to store the energy that is produced generally from renewable sources. And in many countries, we have a lot of, let me say, installation of solar, and we start to see some wind also power that during the days, of course, in terms of solar is produced, utilized, but then is wasted, of course, during the night time or when there is no wind. And our system is allowed, let me say, to store, and means must be seen like a storage, of course, a system to store and to use energy when it's necessary. And I was mentioning to you when we spoke yesterday, we have this interesting project as an example in Malaysia, in which we are bringing electricity to school in the East Malaysia, and that are not connected to the grid. And these are boarding schools in which teachers and and kids are leaving during the night. And we believe that we can contribute to this kind of project. And of course, we are enlarging now in some country in Africa, and we try, of course, our challenge. We have some challenges in front of us that is clearly cost, because fuel cell, despite now are getting more and more affordable, are still, let me say, relatively expensive, and the combination with solar and wind, of course, is making, let me say, this system still relatively expensive but affordable. And the next challenge for us is to continue to, let me say, to work in order to simplify and to get, let me say, a system that is really accessible for everybody. And this first project are government-based project, of course, because there are subsidies and so on, but we are looking now for private enterprise and for collaboration around the world. And this is what Electro Power System is doing in developing countries, of course, but in parallel we are working also in Europe and North America on different kind of projects. But I'm very passionate about this because I think that you can combine, let me say, the profit that at the end of the day is necessary because shareholders are looking for this, and investor, of course, with something that is important to contribute, let me say, to change the equation, or at least to support the growth in these countries of the economies and the education, sanitation, all these kind of things.
So this is power generation and power storage. Graphene Technologies, John Myers. This is another issue of carbon mitigation, or at least it's a project with that in mind. It's complicated technology, but I'd like you to explain to us briefly, if you will, firstly what graphene is and how this is potentially a game changer, looking very much forward.
Oh, thank you, and good morning, everybody. Graphene is one of the simplest forms of carbon that you can imagine. It is a single layer of carbon atoms arranged in a tightly packed hexagon that is a crystal. Its properties are, at this point, legendary. I doubt there's more hits you'll get on anything if you Google graphene. Scientists are extremely excited about the material for its electrical transmission properties, its thermal conduction properties, its strength, its optical properties, and there's other behavioral attributes of the material that are also extremely exciting. It almost sounds too good to be true, I have to say, and there's an awful lot of hype about the material. Governments and institutions are putting a lot of money into research for development of different applications for this material. Now, how we make it is unique and I think extremely exciting. I don't see it as terribly complicated. As a matter of fact, it couldn't be simpler. We react in metal. In our case, we like to use magnesium with carbon dioxide. Believe it or not, you get a quite robust energy-producing reaction when you combine those two materials. And the derivative, the product of that reaction is carbon and magnesium oxide. Very easy to separate the magnesium oxide and very easy to reduce the magnesium oxide back to magnesium. So essentially you can think of the process as a single input carbon dioxide to carbon process. It's massively scalable, and importantly we can make a range of composites and structures of graphene that will be useful in lithium-ion batteries and solar cells, in advanced composites, in catalytic systems for chemical processes, and so forth. Some of those are areas where we are engaged already with major international corporations, and some of those, one area in particular, we've developed intellectual property and applications ourselves.
Let's move on a little bit away from specifically the carbon area. Raad Mobrem, you work in lettuce. Now, you better explain to us precisely what the system is that you're operating there and how that is in helping enhance the practical operation of businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Lettuce is a very intuitive cloud-based inventory and order management system that enables SMBs to capture, track, and process orders from anywhere in the world in real time. A perfect example of this is, imagine a clothing company who sells to brick and mortar retailers. They sell direct to consumers online. They sell through Amazon, eBay, all these different sales channels. It's totally fragmented, and all the data is completely separate in different systems or back office systems. And what we do is we integrate all of these different systems on the front end, and also integrate back office systems like CRM, accounting, inventory, credit card processing, and shipping, and automate the entire flow. So we're providing technology that has notoriously been used by big corporations and bringing it down to the SMB level, which is giving them a better advantage to succeed. One of the things that we've seen, and being a small business, when we first started the software, we had a pet products company, and we started this business basically with an unfair advantage. And I remember specifically a perfect example of this. In the 2008-2012 presidential campaign, there's a lot of political talk going on, and everything, any TV you would turn on, any newspaper you would read, you would see that, you would hear that small business is the core of our economy. But the resources are so limited, financially, technology, everything you could think of, it's very, very limited. And so you're starting with an unfair disadvantage. And so what we want to do with our technology is not only provide a solution that increases the efficiency of your operations, but also educates these SMBs on how to run their business properly, how to, through proper systems and flows and design, enable the SMB to educate themselves on the appropriate practices.
Michael Pfeffer, tell us about Ibis Networks.
So, well, thank you. Good morning. Heidi talked about one of her motors could radically improve an HVAC system, say in this hotel. Ibis is focused on the very bottom end of electrical consumption for large organizations, for hotels, schools, big businesses. We're looking at plug load consumption, stuff that you plug into the wall socket. It's the fastest growing category of energy consumption for businesses. About 40 to 45% of the energy consumed in a facility today is coming out of your wall sockets. You have no ability to understand where that energy is going. You plug a bunch of things in, and you pay your bill, and maybe you've got Johnson Controls telling you, how much your lighting is and how much your HVAC is, but you have no idea what's the computer doing, what's the printer doing. So we have a retrofit smart grid, if you will. We use a smart socket and telesocket, plug it into the wall, into the socket, then plug your device in. It does three things. It does three things very simply and very well. They all start to talk to one another, so we create a grid, a network. They measure energy consumption for any device that's plugged into a socket in real time, communicate back to the server, and the dashboard, the software user interface, allows us to turn things on and off. And so if you think about a coffee maker, it's drawing 50 watts all the time. Now, is it really worth your time to go and unplug it at night when you leave the office? Probably not. But if you can turn 500 things off remotely, it starts to add up. So we're trying to solve the death of a million cuts by creating retrofit smart grids with our sockets and enabling large businesses to start managing and understanding energy consumption.
It sounds like a household product, potentially, as well as an office-based product.
There are a myriad of smart sockets out there for the household. What's different about our approach is we looked at large businesses and said, well, you need 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 of these. We're not a hardware play. We don't sell sockets like for the household. I think that's, Apple's going to win that game because you can buy one today at the Apple store, buy 5, and you're done. We are a service-oriented place. So we give you the sockets. We install them, we install the network, and then we help you do it at scale. So it is a household play. We don't play in the consumer space. We're really focused on government, military, large businesses, education, hospitality, that kind of scale.
Jeff Hudson, Venafi, tell us about it.
So thank you very much. move to the front of my chair because this is about security, and so I want to get close to you. Let me just start out by saying that cyber criminals are targeting the top 40 industries, 50 companies deep, and trying to systematically strip out intellectual property for from those companies. Okay, let's put that aside for a minute. I was talking to a CEO of one of the largest investment banks last week, and I said, how do you know and how do you trust the traders that are on the trading floor? And anybody been on a trading floor? You know how important it is to know who's on the trading floor, right? Because that's where all the action happens. And he talked about guards and guns and cameras and badges and gates and doorways. Very physical. I said, how much of your world is in the digital realm? And he said, well, a lot. I said, well, how do you trust that the right machines and the right applications are in your digital realm? And he said, well, I have somebody that takes care of that for me. We're talking about trust, okay? And human-to-human trust, the reason I can sit here next to these gentlemen is because Sharon introduced us all, right? We have a third party. When we talk about human-to-machine trust, the machine, I'm going to turn it around, the machine trusts us because it gave us a username and a password so we can log on. But then the minute you press a key, a lot of things happen machine to machine and application to application. And those entities use certificates, SSH keys, and encryption keys to authenticate and to keep secrets. And that's a really important part of our digital realm, yet almost nobody knows how this works. To wit, our customers who are the top of the Global 2000, all household names, when we first engage them, we ask them, how many certificates and keys do you have? And they'll give us a number, and we generally find that they have 5 times more than they thought they had. Now, this lack of visibility is exactly what a criminal likes, right? When's somebody going to break into your house? When you're not home. When is somebody going to pick your pocket? When you're not looking. And so what's happened is the cyber criminals have figured this out, and the templates got started with Stuxnet about 2.5 years ago, where the bad guys, good guys, bad guys, I'll leave it up to you, figured out that if we compromised one of these certificates, it was a moral equivalent of a username and a password to get into a machine. And they became trusted inside these networks, and they stole a lot of information. Well, this has become templatized. You can go on the underweb today and buy for about $10,000 everything you need to create one of these malware attacks. And large corporations don't know how many of these things they have, and it's a really big problem. I liken it to sort of like a username and password, so I asked CIOs all the time, I said, would you live in an environment where you don't know how many usernames and how many passwords you have or what systems they give access to? He said, of course not. I said, well then how can you live in an environment where you don't know how many certificates you have and how many SSH keys and how many encryption keys you have? And they're stuck. They don't have an answer to it. So this is all about trust. And what we do, I just needed to illuminate the problem because it's kind of an esoteric problem, but it's one we all have to understand because it's at the root of everything that everybody's talked about here, which is trust. How do we trust these networks? And so this gets all the way back to people steal things, the bad guys steal things, and if these networks had a lot more trust built into them because people were actively monitoring, managing, and protecting their keys and certificates, we wouldn't have half the problems we have today. So that's what we do. We sell software that helps the largest corporations in the world protect their keys and their certificates across the enterprise. Did that explain it?
I think I'd explain it. Thank
Did
you
that
very
explain
much.
it?
And I know that internet security is going to be an issue that's going to be coming up again and again across the week. But I'd like to raise a question actually that Raad Mobrem made slightly there in relation to your software, the product that you offer. Is how supported do you guys all feel as relatively new companies starting out in the current climate? I mean, given that you're all innovators of different kinds approaching a very challenging economic environment at the moment, how supported do you feel in terms of the venture capital in this country and everything else that you require just to get on your feet? Heidi?
Well, I guess I'd like to issue a challenge to the group. I think part of the problem in our case, and I think maybe across the board, but I don't want to speak for my colleagues, is that we've underinvested in infrastructure. We've underinvested in physical things. And we've gotten so far away from the physical that we've failed to understand that the physical is at the end of the day, behind the digitization of our infrastructure and our environment. So what does that look like with the motor? Ultimately, what it looks like with the motor is our motor technology is enabled by shifting the burden from the active materials to the power electronics and software. So we're moving away from toxic rare earth metals, from additional copper needs, shifting to software and power electronics. Ultimately, then, we can embed machine-to-machine. We also have additional patents on adaptive control, and we'll embed machine-machine learning and digitization. We can talk to Michael. We'll need the security that these guys are talking about, and we'll be able to teach people how to use their businesses better. None of that is enabled unless we have the intestinal fortitude to invest in infrastructure. And frankly, right now in this country, I don't see it, and it's very worrisome.
Has this country abandoned clean tech? No, has it abandoned that agenda? Any thoughts?
You don't advertise yourself as clean tech these days. The bloom is a bit off the rose, but you're all accredited investors, right? So we are in fundraising mode.
Right.
I would say, we're a company from Hawaii. It's a bit of a backwater. We're off Broadway in terms of fundraising. I am also the only active venture capital firm in Hawaii, so there's not a lot of people to go to. But we're working very closely in Silicon Valley now, and Seattle, and other areas that are hotbeds of venture to get funding. It's a bit challenging if you're in the clean tech space, but I have been pleasantly surprised at how active venture's gotten again. The buzz is there when you go to the Valley, you go to Seattle, you go to places like that. It's hot. So if you've got a great company and a great product and a great team, you can get funding. But it is definitely not as easy as the go-go days.
John, how are you feeling about things?
Well, I'm sort of happy when the go-go days are gone, because a lot of stuff gets funded that shouldn't be when things are hot. So it's all about, and I think everybody here is speaking to hard returns. So if clean tech can deliver hard returns, measurable returns, then it's fundable. And as to whether there's adequate support or not, you have to earn your stripes. It's never easy. It's never been easy.
It's easy having some of the best PR of any new product around, though, isn't it?
Well, Mark Anderson, thank you very much. Mark's a visionary. We need visionaries, and certainly this whole movement toward addressing major problems, security, environmental, requires the kind of visionary leadership that Mark supplies, and we need more Marks. And we need one in the White House and one in Congress. But I'm optimistic. I don't think that we have a challenge here other than one that we're up to.
Raad, you're the guy supporting businesses at a time when no one else will. Is that the implication here, or how do you see it?
Well, it depends. For the software industry, it's actually quite easy to get money now. It is a very hot industry. It's a very hot sector. Originally, consumer products were the craze. Facebook going public, but that didn't do so well. But until that point, every consumer product in the world was getting funded. Now, you see successful IPOs for enterprise companies, and enterprise software, excuse me, enterprise software is the new hot thing. And luckily, I'm in enterprise software. Traditional SMBs are product-based companies, actual physical products, which is a very rare thing in the software world. It's much, much harder. There is a new trend as well with electric type products. For example, the 3D printer. That's like the new craze again in Silicon Valley. So there's definitely about what's hot and what's not in Silicon Valley, in Los Angeles, in New York, going to venture capital and angel groups in the software industry. But for my case, short answer is it's not very hard. For physical products, it's much, much harder.
Stefano, you're selling something to governments primarily at the moment, are you?
Not necessarily. I was mentioning to you on the rural electrification, but we are also involved in the developed country in telecom backup and emergency services. I can give you maybe the perspective from a European or Asian perspective on the venture capital. Means clean tech for sure is not so sexy in particular from an Asia perspective. At the end of the day, price and let me say a return is more important. What personally, at least for our company, we are in a stage in which we are looking more for partnership and support, less than capital. Means, yes, of course, we are looking for capital and we are in fundraising mode also as well, but we are looking for not only financial, let me say, support, we are looking for create critic mass and, let me say, to enlarge our, let me say, customer base, but operational also means. From this perspective, I need to say that I'm living in Asia and there is a lot of, let me say, dynamics there. A lot of things are happening, of course. So they have money, but they want to invest, and they want to invest into Europe in particular. Means we are in a quite good condition. But from a European perspective, I can tell you that, okay, in the country in which we are, venture capitalist is quite much more, let's say, popular. In Europe, we have, of course, but it's more limited appetite to risk, and now the mood is quite depressed, of course, for the overall scenario that we have. I mean, it's not easy to raise capital from a venture capital viewpoint in Europe, and this is the reason why we're more focused on Asia, and also now in the States, we want to find partnership more importantly than more than money.
Jeff, who's not investing in better IT security at the moment?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Who isn't investing in better IT security at the moment? I think we're all being...
The people that are on their way to extinction. And I think that from my perspective, and I've actually done this once or twice before, when there's a good idea that can show solid returns, people invest. But it's about the future, and it's about the question of good. And so that has to do a lot with perception. And a while ago, back in the day, if I use that, people were interested, the investors were interested in building solid companies and seeing long-term returns, and they'd really invest and work with. Today, it's a lot of MBAs and the venture funds that are more portfolio managers. And it's always easier to kind of jump onto something where a lot of people are doing something. Like right now, enterprise software, people are spending to mitigate threats, right? And so we're in that space. So people spend a lot of money on what we have to offer. And it's just like in investing. If there's a category where people are investing a lot, it's easier to convince yourself and your partnership that that's a good idea and there's going to be future return. It's kind of that lemming effect thing. So, but I've always thought that a good idea that you could kind of prove or paint a picture of good returns into the future, those things always got funded. I don't care what the overarching environment was. Some bad ideas didn't get funded, but the good ones did.
So improving the world and delivering a return in 6 cases, I certainly hope. Thanks to my guests, Stefano Poli, John Myers, Heidi Lubin, Michael Pfeffer, Raad Mobrem, and Jeff Hudson. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.